Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to join us here at the National Council of Churches Eco-Justice Program. We have a wonderful webinar in store for you with Cynthia Barnett, the author of Blue Revolution, and Elspeth here on our Eco-Justice staff. Cynthia Barnett will be up first. She is the author of Blue Revolution, this absolutely incredible book that provides us with a way to think about water and how to talk about a water ethic in our communities, and she will share more on that topic during her presentation. I had the pleasure of talking with Cynthia earlier this week, and I learned that she is also a native Floridian, as am I, and is actually from the next county over. I actually played for high school in volleyball, soccer, and many other sports growing up, so we might as well be neighbors. She currently lives in Gainesville with her two daughters and has a wealth of knowledge about how we can change the way that water is thought of and used in this country. It is a pleasure to have her with us today. Thank you, Cynthia, for taking some time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and then Elspeth currently works in our Eco-Justice program. She hails from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and is our Lutheran volunteer for the year, doing a year-long fellowship with the Eco-Justice program. She's been a wonderful addition and originally hails from the great state of Minnesota. So I'm sure there are a couple of Minnesotans on the phone that you guys can give her a little shout-out when she is presenting for the second part. She's going to be talking about our Christian call to care for water as a gift of God, as a gift from God. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia. Again, my apologies for all the rules and regulations for this webinar, but we're so thrilled to have so many of you on. And Cynthia, please take it away.
Well, thank you so much. Can everyone see that I've put on the first slide now? Does that look okay?
It's showing up for me, so it should be showing up for the rest of folks as well.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for all the people I see on the call, and I want to start by thanking the National Council of Churches for its amazing work on a reader's guide to Blue Revolution. I will tell you that when I began being asked to speak in churches, sometimes I would feel a little intimidated, as if not qualified to do that. You know, I've researched water for many years, but not the spiritual angle, so I can't tell you how excited I am to make this connection and to be able to take the idea of a water ethic for the nation into congregations, because that's one of the places where it will spread. So Blue Revolution describes this idea of a water ethic for the United States and how it will transform how we value and live with water in much the same way we came to value natural lands at the turn of the century, or in the same way we transformed the littering mentality mid-century, convincing people to stop tossing their trash on the ground. So America's system of water management, grounded in regulation or lack thereof, and the courts, have really been unable to generate this sort of ethic for water. I really think it's going to come down to citizens, and as such, again, our places of worship are an ideal launch point. I just tried to switch along. Let me make sure I know how to do this. Okay, can everyone see the second one? Sorry about that. Okay, great. So before I talk about the United States and the water ethic idea, I think it's really important to put the discussion of our water woes into their larger context. So your faith communities already understand that U.S. water problems do not hold the same urgency as the global water crisis and its victims, 3.5 million of whom die each year of water-related illnesses. So we must remember the 1.2 billion people globally who do not have access to clean drinking water and the 2.4 billion who lack basic sanitation. So I think, so many of you are already working on water problems in the third world and already working on the monumental issue of the human right to water. And I just wanted to put all of this into context. Compared with those problems, this is really easy. This idea of a water ethic is sort of the low-hanging fruit here in the United States. So the irony of America's water problems then, and especially in wet parts of the country like Florida where I live, but also really everywhere, we were blessed with such water riches compared with the other continents. So 3.5 million miles of rivers running across our country, another estimated 60,000 trillion gallons of groundwater stored beneath our feet in aquifers. Now, these freshwater habitats have become the single most degraded of all America's major ecosystems. And more than any other threat, it is our harnessing water for human use. So flood control, power production, agricultural irrigation, and water for our homes and businesses that is to blame. This is all of us. There's not one culprit that we can blame. So this is true for the great waterways of the eastern United States as it is for those in the West. So we want to begin by asking ourselves, I think, what makes Americans so complacent to the water problems of our home and the water problems of the world? And what I've come to believe is that it is America's illusion of water abundance. So the last time American citizens got truly engaged in water issues, a lot of it had to do with visual pollution, and a lot of it had to do with the age of the big dams, right? This is the early 1970s, and the U.S. at that time did begin to move away from the big dams and toward a more ethical water age, what we might call the age of restoration. So this is the era when the U.S. Passed the Clean Water Act and created EPA and other environmental safeguards. But here's the rub. Nearly 40 years into this restoration age, we still haven't been able to wean ourselves from the illusion of water abundance. So despite evidence to the contrary, from saltwater intrusion into wells all up and down the eastern seaboard to the shrinking Colorado River, Americans still do view water as an endless resource. I'm sure you've seen this in your own communities. Some half of all farmers east of the Mississippi still flood irrigate their crops. We still flush toilets with potable water that's been treated at our great expense to meet federal drinking water standards. We still pour large amounts of this same potable water on lawns. Lawns can be about half of all of our public water use in summer. In fact, it turns out that the lawn is America's largest crop. For Blue Revolution, I interviewed NASA scientists who had used satellite imagery to see just how much of the nation is covered with turf grass, and she found 63,240 square miles of the country are covered with turf, which is an area larger than most individual American states. So in Blue Revolution, I jokingly call all this turf our 51st state. Now, don't get me wrong, the conveyance of clean water into our cities and the movement of wastewater out was among the greatest scientific achievements of the 20th century, one that saved countless lives. What happened is, I think we sort of went crazy. The great achievement of fresh water has now turned into an entitlement. Water flows from our taps like magic. We enjoy this endless and cheap supply of clean water, and we are more than happy, of course, to be absolved of the realities of our wastewater. But the resulting ethos has helped lead us to real ecological degradation. And I don't have time to get too much into that, and I think you will understand locally what the most important issues are in your own communities, and then later Elspeth will talk about how to apply faith to some of these issues. But I just wanted to, I'll go around and give you a couple of examples of how unsustainable American water use has become in the 21st century, and this idea of the illusion of abundance. So I think the Colorado River is the best national example of the illusion of abundance, and maybe particularly iconic Hoover Dam. You know, so many people, more than 1 million people a year, go and visit the dam and see this great, this great feat of America's engineering ingenuity. I recently went on the dam tour, and I was so surprised that there wasn't one word about the stress to the Colorado River. I'm hearing a beep. That might be my phone. I really apologize if it is. So what you don't learn on the tour is that there is no longer enough for all human legal users, much less fish and wildlife, during drought in the Colorado River. And America's largest reservoir, Lake Mead, has a 50-50 chance of drying up by 2021, according to climate scientists. By 2017, they say there's an equally good chance that water levels in the reservoir will drop so low that Hoover Dam will be incapable of producing hydroelectric power. So again, most people just don't know that. I mean, we still see the Colorado River and the dams as a sort of security. They even use the word security in the video that they show tourists when I went to the Hoover Dam tour this fall. The Midwest, I think, reflects another side of this illusion.
Cynthia,
Yes.
I wanted to pause you for a second. I do see we have a question, so I'm going
to sure.
unmute Kathleen here and allow her to ask her question.
I'm sorry, Kathleen, I didn't see your little hand up. I will remember now to look over there.
Oh, that's okay. This is just a quick question about whether we would have access to the slides following the presentation.
Yes, it's absolutely fine with me, Kathleen. I was thinking you may not want all of them, but we'll make them available, and I'll make a few handouts too. Particularly, I have a one-pager on bringing the water ethic to your place of worship. That's like really tangible little things you can do. And then I'll do another one-pager with the water ethic definitions that I'll talk about at the end of the presentation. So anyway, the Midwest, the Midwest reflecting another side of that illusion. We look at this region and see the breadbasket of America, yet I think most people have no idea that the massive High Plains aquifer that irrigates an entire fifth of the country's agricultural harvest is being depleted to extinction. In many parts, this is glacial, ancient water that is not being replenished in the way some aquifers, like aquifers where I live in the southeast, are replenished with rainfall. Heading into the southeast, as I mentioned, people think of water as very abundant here, and those of you who live in the southeast know that Florida, Georgia, and Alabama have been fighting for more than 20 years over the Chattahoochee River that leads to our Apalachicola Bay. The point I want to make here about this region is that we, taxpayers in these three states, have spent $30 million in the past 10 years alone on legal fees fighting over this water. And it's such a waste. You may have seen that the U.S. Supreme Court has declined to hear the case. And so now it's been kicked back to the states. And to me, that's a really tragic waste of $30 million and 20 years of our time. when you think about how we could have been working together over that time to use less instead of fighting each other to grab more and more, how much more good could have come from this situation. And I was just thinking the other day it would be kind of cool if we chose churches in the 3 states and brought them together and see if they could come up with a compromise that the politicians and the lawyers have not been able to come up with. And then the last point I wanted to make was about energy. This is another type of mirage. Every energy source except wind has significant consequences for water. This is the Millstone plant in Connecticut, one of a handful of nuclear plants that have had to shut down temporarily due to drought conditions. Yet the water consequences of energy projects and the energy consequences of water projects are really often afterthoughts. So these situations and others I could tell you about all over the country make clear to me that it won't be water management or government regulation or the courts or costly technical fixes or various other solutions that save our freshwaters for future generations and ecosystems. I think all of these angles have a place. But what is needed now is an ethical framework for water. Whether your local waterways are choked with toxic algae or plagued with low water levels, it has become clear that our society must lift water above politics and the permitting hydrocracy, and to help people see it as a moral and an ethical issue, which is, of course, where the church can come in. So in 2009, 2010, I took a year off from my day job to travel around the world and the country to see what this ethic might look like. Various academics and human rights activists have sounded this call before. The Global Water Policy Project Sandra Pastel defines a water ethic as making protection of freshwater ecosystems a central goal in all that we do. The Oregon writer and ethicist Kathleen Dean Moore makes the moral argument that taking whatever we need from the world to support our comfortable lives while leaving unreliable freshwater supplies to the future is not worthy of us as moral beings. And this is sort of my own definition that I've come up with just, talking to people about this. It's very simple. It's the definition of sustainability, right? Making sure the way we live with water today doesn't jeopardize fresh, clean water for our children, businesses, and ecosystems tomorrow. So the voice that resonated most with me was that of Aldo Leopold. Many of you know him, founder of the field of wildlife ecology. Leopold was really intensely interested in figuring out how to help people see their connection to the natural world, and he believed the answer was an extension of the social conscience from people to land, what he described as the land ethic. So 60 years ago, he describes this land ethic in the beautiful book, A Sand County Almanac. And what I want to say about this and comparing it to the water ethic is that these were tangible changes. Leopold wrote about soil, the way we treated soil, the way farmers rotated crops. He talked about things that we could tangibly change that did help us live differently with the land. And in fact, because we've made these changes, the severe drought that we're undergoing right now is not kicking up the apocalyptic Dust Bowl storms that we saw in the 1930s. We changed some of our ways, and it's made a difference, and it's the same for water. So Leopold defined his land ethic as a community instinct in the making. I love that term, and I think that's where churches come into, the community instinct in the making that builds an ecological consciousness among everyone who uses land. He also turned out to inspire the water ethic as father to his son, Luna Leopold, who grew up, all his kids grew up to be scientists. Luna grows up to be head of the U.S. Geological Survey and later a distinguished professor at Berkeley, and he's often called the father of modern hydrology. He goes on to build upon his father's ideas to call for an ethos for water. He wished most for a reverence for rivers, and this is something each congregation could really help with. Most Americans do not know where their water comes from, what's in it, who's in charge of it, what it really costs us, where it goes after we use it. So Luna Leopold's reverence for rivers is the idea that our populace would come to know these things. So if you were a church, for example, you could sponsor or lead a watershed tour to show people where they are in their watershed and how they fit in. But for Luna, that reverence would not be enough. He also tried to help people see that technology could not fix all of our water problems, and that indefinite expansion of our water supply was not possible. With nature's lessons in mind, he wanted to find the steady state, the balance point, again, at which our water use today will not jeopardize fresh, clean water for our children and ecosystems tomorrow. So he saw this as a shared ethic, a set of guiding beliefs for government, large water users, and citizens. So the shared nature of this is really key. We know that agriculture and energy each drink up about 40% of the U.S. water pie. So the ethic is much bigger than asking citizens not to water the grass, right? It's really a new way of living with water and valuing water in every sector of the economy. So the question before us, of course, becomes how do we make this transition? For an answer, I looked to countries that were a lot like the United States in other ways, but had come to have a tangible, widespread ethic for water. They do tend, I will tell you, they tend to be places that have already been through the crisis. So like the Dutch who have been through the crisis of flood for all of their history, and the Australians who have been through the crisis of drought. The Dutch are really inspirational for our divided times because their culture shows how people with different points of view, different financial interests, and different political stripes can really come together on water. And of course, I don't have time to tell you the whole story of the Netherlands, but it's very important for the United States, the lessons for how we deal with climate change. You know, the Dutch have the proudest water engineering history of anyone on the globe, and yet they had some real surprises. They thought the first consequences of climate change would be sea level rise, and so they built these enormous barriers over years and spending billions and billions of dollars. Well, it turns out that the first consequences of climate change have been more river flooding, and the more river flooding they've had, the rivers had no place to go because they had built up these enormous barriers all along the coast, and so there was no place for the rivers to go but up and over the inland dikes. And so, again, this chapter, I think, is a good lesson for Americans, not only about how we deal with this side of too much water and climate change, but in this way of working together and bringing everybody together to deal with water. Australia is another country that now sees water as a matter of national urgency. 15 years ago, Australia entered this drying period that seemed much more severe than normal drought cycles. The first sign that something was wrong was that water levels in dams across the continent dropped below 35% capacity, which had been unheard of in previous droughts. So scientists say Australia was feeling the water supply impacts of climate change earlier than the rest of us. And the amazing thing about the Australia story is how similar Australians were to Americans in terms of how wasteful they were. They used about 150 gallons of water per person every day. Now they use about half that. And the really interesting thing is that they say they would never go back to the old way of how they used to use water, and it's really been a revolution over there. Part of the revolution is big technologies, but just as much is small technologies, small as in waterless urinals, waterless car washes, even waterless walks in the Chinese restaurants, and of course you've got micro irrigation for agriculture. It is just a different mindset. It is a way of living differently, and it's not terribly hard to live really differently with water. Again, it's just this illusion of abundance that we are stuck in, doesn't allow us to think differently. And then, too, water is so cheap that we haven't really thought differently about it. And, of course, rainwater catchment is a huge, huge thing there. Here in the United States, I have a chapter on San Antonio as a good example of a wasteful city that made a pretty big turnaround on water. I do want to say with this one that churches and colleges were two institutions that really answered the call to help the entire metro region embrace a new ethic for water. We've seen that same thing closer to where I live in Atlanta. And I like in the San Antonio chapter of the book being able to show how the water ethic can spread building supervisor by building supervisor and citizen by citizen. And just to mention a few of the things that churches can do, Elspeth is going to talk much more deeply about this, but I like some of the small things that I've seen around the country. Again, congregations that had worked and still work on clean water projects as an obligation to help the poor in places like Haiti now are also working on some really practical aspects of water sustainability back home. So this is Southwest Florida St. John's Episcopal Church. Parishioners planted this rain garden as a model for more citizens to learn about stormwater pollution and to show them how to capture rainwater so they could reduce runoff into Naples Bay. And around the country, churches have launched water book groups or devoted entire weeks of adult vacation Bible school to water sustainability. So the water ethic requires this sort of cultural broadening, or you might call it democratization. It says that water managers, water lawyers, even environmentalists are no longer enough. Just like in the early 1970s, water now needs the rest of America. So if anyone is having trouble imagining the day when we could actually elevate water above politics, I want to take you back to a time not so very long ago and show you this very fast video clip. Let's see. 1:30. Okay. I don't think we're going to listen to the sound. I just wanted to show you this clip. I don't know if any of you have seen this show called Mad Men, but it's about a prototypical American family, Madison Avenue in the 1960s. Did you see? This is the handsome Don Draper. He's the dad and the advertising executive. Did you see he just chucked his beer can into the woods when he picked up his picnic? And now this is Mrs. Draper. Look what she does when she cleans up her picnic. So yes.
It
Did you see
doesn't seem
it?
to be playing for me, unfortunately.
Oh shoot! I'm so sorry. It played beautifully for me. I guess no one has seen, so I'll have to describe what happened, which I saw on my screen.
Yeah.
This advertising executive, Don Draper, chucks his beer can into the woods when he cleans up his picnic. And then the lovely Mrs. Draper throws her picnic detritus all over the floor. There's some hands up. Are you guys all saying that you couldn't see the video?
Yeah, if you're saying that, then you can put your hands back down. If not, we'll unmute
Kathleen, Judy, and Paige, were you not able? If you weren't able to see the video, I'm sorry, nobody was able to see it. But the point I want to make is that mid-century, this is how many American families lived, even those, like picture-perfect families, sometimes littered. In fact, research on American littering behavior shows we are capable of significant ethical change in just one generation. So in 1969, half of all Americans littered. By 2009, it was 15%. Drivers included inspired political leadership, private industry buy-in by way of packaging and other changes, successful educational campaigns, and government fines and regulations. But the really interesting thing that the littering studies show us is that what changed the culture more than any other factor was a community-wide judgment about cleanliness. In other words, simply an ethic. So once citizens had embraced this ethic, it was they who pressured industry. So, for example, the beverage companies finally eliminated the pull-off tabs on cans that were such a problem. It's not something they did on their own. It was something they did because their customers insisted on it. And I think that's what we will see on a lot of these water issues. I see Kathleen, Debbie, and Paige have their hands up.
Yeah. Now it's just Debbie and Paige. I'm going to take a second to unmute Debbie.
Okay.
Debbie, you should be unmuted. Did you have a question?
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to let you know I could see the video. I think I typed that in. But.
Oh, great. Thank you. That's good to hear.
Oh, great. Thank you, Debbie. Some people could see it.
Yes. And now I'm going to unmute Paige. Paige, you should be unmuted if you have a question.
No, I just wanted to say all you had to do was hit the play button on your screen and it would play it.
Oh, okay. Your own screen.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Paige and Debbie. That was sort of a gimmick to show you how we lived differently in the 1960s. So you could, if you wanted to show that little clip, if you ever do a presentation on the water ethic at your congregation, we'll get you a clean copy of it. So I just love that story about littering, and I love the littering research because it shows that the ethic was more important than any other thing we did. And it turns out that it was the ethic among citizens that pressured industry and government to do the right thing. And I really think that's going to be the same with water. So as I was finishing the book, I hesitated defining a water ethic myself because I think each community will build its own water ethic based on unique water resources and cultures. It will look different in each of your communities in the same way your farmers markets look different, right, depending on local climate and crops. But I did sketch out 5 common goals with the caveat that these are fluid. Aldo Leopold had this great line. He said the land ethic would evolve in the minds of the thinking community, and you, our religious leaders, are that thinking community. So the caveat is that they are fluid, that Americans come to value water from appreciating local streams to being willing to pay an appropriate price for water, and again, we'll put these on the website. We work together to use less and less rather than fight each other all the time to grab more and more. We try to keep water local to avoid the financial, ecological, and energy costs of long-distance transfers. We avoid the 2 big mistakes of our water history: over-tapping natural supplies and over-relying on the costliest fixes that bring unintended consequences to future generations. And finally, we leave as much as prudently possible in nature, aquifers, wetlands, and rivers so that our children and grandchildren, with benefit of time and evolving knowledge, can make their own decisions about water. So I am going to end my remarks there because I really want to hear from Elspeth and how she puts this together with the faith communities and the the reader's guide that she's put together. And I could say a few things a little later, but I'll wait and see what questions you have. Thank you so much again. And Elspeth, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Actually, I'm seeing here that we have a question for you from Audrey. So before I move on to my section, I am going to unmute Audrey and have her ask her question. Audrey, you should be unmuted now.
Thank you. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's really, really helpful. I'm up here in the Pacific Northwest, and one of the issues we're facing is a Nestle bottling plant wanting to come in and take some publicly owned water, which is just the local manifestation of what I think is maybe an opposite water ethic that I'm seeing, which is through bottled water. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that. It seems to me that not only is bottled water really wasteful of water and other resources, it feeds into the idea that our tap water is not clean enough to drink, and that then we need to commercialize it and buy water, privatize water instead of it being a public good that we all have access to. And I mean, even churches will have bottled water at events and conferences, and it just breaks my heart. So I just wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Audrey, it's a great question, and I'm really of two minds about it, and so I'm going to give you just my honest thought about bottled water and how we see it. I'll start by saying I'm afraid that the environmental community's focus on bottled water has taken the spotlight and the issue away from the greatest threats to groundwater pumping, which really are agriculture. I wish people understood the amount of water agriculture uses, the pumping, the decimation of the High Plains aquifer, what is in our food, what choice you're making when you choose a hamburger over something else. I think that's a really important and huge issue facing our country that people don't understand. And so I see 90% of environmentalists' time on water issues sometimes seem to go to bottled water. So as an extractive industry, it's a drop in the bucket compared to agriculture and things like phosphate mining, and then certainly energy. Energy and agriculture each use about 40% of our water supplies nationally. So I just want to set the stage by saying that. However, Audrey, that said, you are absolutely right that the bottled water industry, and in fact in some cases rather nefariously, has made tap water seem unclean, and that's not the case. Tap water actually has to go through more testing than bottled water, and it's clean, it's great, we pay for it, we pay for it to be clean. We want to value that water. And so sometimes I wish the people who market bottled water on Madison Avenue, if those people could be the ones who help us save our fresh water and our ecosystems, because they've just pulled off an incredible coup convincing people to spend that much money for a little bottle of water. And as you point out, the really environmentally damaging thing about tap water is the use of plastic, and petroleum and the bottles and the waste that generates. So even though it's a small part of water use, it is symbolically really important, and I think you're absolutely right. Whenever I give a talk or have anything to do with a conference, I'm very careful to make sure tap water is what is served, because that's symbolically important. So thank you for that great question.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey.
Thank you. Thanks. That's great.
All right. Well, I just wanted to also take the opportunity to really thank Cynthia for being able to be here today and share her knowledge and expertise with us, and also for highlighting at the end there some of the efforts that faith communities have already been doing to get into water issues. So I'm going to change myself to the presenter, so you'll be able to follow along with the slides as I change them. Everyone now should be able to see the first slide that says Water and Christian Faith. Cynthia, are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Wonderful. Well, as I was introduced before, my name is Elspeth and I'm with the National Council of Churches Eco-Justice Programs. And I helped to create this new resource that we have that is really a faith guide to the Blue Revolution book. And we're really excited to offer this and to partner with Cynthia in offering this resource for churches. We really came into this because though Blue Revolution is not a religious book, we really saw a connection between the focus on a water ethic and creating that water ethic within communities, and how that connects to our call as Christians to be good stewards of God's creation. And I just wanted to start out by talking a little bit about water throughout the Bible and how important water is to our faith tradition and to our spirituality as Christians. Water is actually mentioned 722 times throughout the Bible, so obviously it's something that plays a really integral role and has a lot of different functions throughout the Bible. Before I get into that more, I do see a question, so I'm going to unmute Judy here.
Hi, Elizabeth. I am a very avid Christian, but I am also a very avid interfaith worker. And when you say water is important to Christians, and it's important to Christians, it's really the ecology is critically important to all faiths. And I think I would like to share this with my interfaith people, but when you keep saying it's important to Christians, it negates how they feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you that this is something that water issues and use of water in faith is something that is applicable across the board to so many different faith traditions. However, our focus for this resource specifically, just because we are the National Council of Churches and our member denominations are all Christians, that's sort of where our faith focus is coming from. But we would definitely encourage you to share this, and I think a lot of the aspects of it can be adapted easily to other traditions.
Okay.
Elspeth, could I make a comment as well?
Yeah, certainly.
The one pager that I mentioned to you about bringing the water ethic to your faith community, I wrote it in a way that is super inclusive of all religions, and that really flows across them all, if you will. And so I will make sure that's available. And I began the whole thing by talking about the importance of water in Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. So, just making clear that this is a crucial issue no matter your faith. This is an issue that bonds us. It is literally a chemical bond, but water is also a great bond among people. And I think you make a great point, and we will make the one pager available to you too. And I'll just mention quickly, I was just interviewing someone about the green roof atop the Islamic Center in Milwaukee. The churches in Milwaukee have gotten really involved in some of the stormwater issues, including doing green roofs, and one of the largest ones is on the Islamic Center. So there are great interfaith efforts going on around the country.
Absolutely. Thank you. So to move on to talking about water throughout the Bible, I had 3 sort of stories or passages throughout the Bible that I did just want to touch on briefly to sort of get us in the mindset of thinking about how deeply integrated water is with our Christian faith. The first is in Exodus when God asked Moses to strike the stone with his staff and water comes pouring forth. And really in this story, water is a miracle in the midst of this desert and a life-giving force given by God. The second example that I had was appropriate for us as we come up here on Holy Week, the story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. And in this story, water plays a different role. It is an element of cleansing, both physically washing the dirt and the dust off the disciples' feet, as well as spiritually cleansing. And then the final example that I wanted to touch on was the beautiful passage from Amos asking people to let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. In this instance, it's really more about the imagery and asking you to think about these water resources that we already know in order to more fully imagine this justice and righteousness flowing down like these waters. So I think all of these examples are just a few of the very many ways that water is represented throughout the Bible and is very important for our faith. And I think, as in our regular day-to-day life, it can be easy to sort of mindlessly turn on the tap or not think about where our water resources are coming from. And similarly, in our faith and in our Bible study, it can be easy to pass over some of the references to the Bible and not really realize how integral water and themes of water are to our faith. So I wanted to proceed to sort of talking more about the specific themes that we do highlight in this faith resource for Blue Revolution. There are sort of four main themes, each of them corresponding to a specific story or passage in the Bible that talks about water. And the first one of those is really starting at the very beginning of the Bible with the creation story. And in this story, we're told that God gathers the waters together and lets the dry land appear. So sort of even from this very beginning, having a dualistic interpretation of creation, having water and earth coexisting. And this story's message really makes clear for the first time that water is a precious gift that is given to us from God. And this knowledge can really provide the grounding for our own Christian water ethic, serving as a guiding reminder for us to be good stewards of water, and also reminding us that when we aren't good stewards of water, that not only does it affect or pollute the water, it affects all of creation that is so dependent on that water. And as Christians, it's really vital that we keep in mind this shared water ethic and the interdependence of all creation so we can protect the entirety of God's earth and our creation care work. The second theme that I wanted to highlight was God's abundant gift of water. So in our Christian language and in talking about these resources that God has given to us, we often talk about them as abundant gifts. And I know this is in contrast a little bit to how Cynthia talks about it and her language in Blue Revolution. And I think for us as Christians, we see definitely the resources of water and other natural resources as abundant gifts, but we know that part of that understanding is knowing that they are not infinite, that this is a precious gift and an abundant gift, that it won't last forever, and that we have to use it wisely. So the passage from Psalm 104 talks about so many different kinds of water in creation, water as a source for animals and birds to quench their thirst, and water flowing through the valleys and watering trees. And this really provides a powerful reminder for us that this gift is here for us, but we must not squander it, that there is enough to go around and provide for many different needs, but we can't use that as though it's an infinite resource and waste water or pollute water. And I think really when we begin to see this connection on an authentic level, to see that water is truly a gift from God, that sort of shifts our understanding and moves us even deeper into this Christian water ethic, seeing it as an essential part of creation and something that we shouldn't misuse. So on that note, I did want to highlight a couple of projects that we know about and have been following at the National Council of Churches with congregations getting involved in water. One congregation that we highlight on our website that is involved in water issues is St. Anne's Episcopal Church in Woodstock, Illinois, and they did an assessment of the environmental impact of their congregation and their church area, and really found that there were so many surfaces, hard surfaces like sidewalks and parking lots around, that when it rained, that the rain was just flowing straight off of those, picking up a lot of pollution and silt, and then going straight into the water supply. And they wanted to do something to fix that, so they put in a rain garden in order to let the rain flow off into the rain garden and get naturally filtered by those plants. and then get returned to the local water supply that way, so that it would be more clean. Another thing that a lot of congregations, schools, and even individuals are doing at their homes or places of worship is installing rain barrels. So that's another great way to recognize that there's this abundant gift of water that we can capture in these rain barrels and then use later to water the landscape or water the garden and not have to turn on the hose to do that. So I think these are both really great examples of recognizing that water is a gift from God, but also recognizing that it isn't infinite and that we do really have to care for it in order to make sure that there's enough to go around for everyone. The next section that we focus on in the Faith Guide is sort of moving into the transformative nature, especially of water as baptismal water. And in the Bible, water is often a symbol of spiritual renewal and transformation, especially in the story of Jesus' baptism. When Jesus comes up out of the Jordan after being baptized, and when we use baptism in our own congregations, this water of baptism is really a powerful reminder of the forgiveness and love that God offers to all of us. It has transformative power in the ability to wash away sins and welcome baptism recipients into the community and body of Christ. And we really see this as an example of how we can look into sharing this gift with the entire world, that we know that God's love is available for everyone, and we want to make sure that this precious gift of water that God has shared with us is also available for everyone and that it's available equally across the globe. Another congregation that is doing really good work on this is First Congregational United Church of Christ in Salem, Oregon. And they've started a partnership project between schools and churches in the United States and communities in Haiti, looking at clean water issues and setting up sanitation services in communities in Haiti. And so this is a great way to sort of take that developing water ethic as part of a Christian community and translate that into something that can help really realize this transformative vision of how water can be shared more equally across the world. The final piece that we do address in the Water Faith Resource Guide is this image of water that comes up so often in the Bible as living water of everlasting life. And so a really prominent example of this is in the story of the Samaritan woman at the well. And she goes to the well and is interested in just getting a drink of physical water. And Jesus is there telling her about the eternal water that is provided through God. And she is really focused on this physical water at first, and then as Jesus continues to talk, becomes more interested in the eternal water of everlasting life that's provided through God. And so I think in a similar way, we can sort of often get caught up in our superficial needs. It's easy to forget to go deeper, both in terms of receiving the love and healing that's offered through God. And in a similar way, we've really lost our connection to the value of our water systems. And we're called by God, we know, to alter our relationship with water and recognize it as that valuable gift from God that it really is. So those are sort of the four main sections that make up the faith framework for this resource guide. And I just wanted to speak a little bit more about the other things that we will have available in order to supplement this resource guide and in order to help you learn more about Blue Revolution and other water issues. So this resource guide is available for download right now on our website. In addition to the faith resource pieces, it also explores discussion questions and sort of has a starting idea of a couple of action ideas that congregations can get invested in. And as Cynthia said, she's put together a really great resource guide as well that has more hands-on ideas for building this water ethic within congregations and faith communities of all sorts. So definitely, as she was saying, that's something that is wonderful for interfaith groups. And we also will be making available the recording of this webinar we'll be able to package it as a video and put it online soon. So we'll make that available for folks as well. I know a couple of people weren't able to log in and so might not be able to see the slides, but the entire presentation will be available to you if you want to go back to it or share it. And as Cynthia also mentioned, this is something, creating a water ethic, that is really important to do in community and is important to do with other people. So I would certainly encourage you to reach out to other friends or people within your congregation and get them interested in this resource and talking about these issues as well. And it's a great time to be doing this, especially right now, because tomorrow is actually World Water Day, the 22nd. So that's sort of a nice holiday or marking point that you can use to talk to other people about these issues as well. So I just really want to thank everyone for taking the time to be on this webinar today and to think about these issues. We did want to reserve some time now at the end for question and answer sessions, and we did want to go first to those that people have typed already. So I do see, first of all, one from Larry asking about, as an interfaith environmental ethicist, I noted that you focus on the churches and not all faith communities. And so I think we've sort of answered this one with our previous answer. So I guess if you, Larry, I think unfortunately your phone line isn't connected to your name, so I'm not able to unmute you. But if you had something that we didn't address in our original question, I would encourage you to type that out again, and we will get to that. Next up on our typed out questions, I see a question from Judy that says, what possibility is there that desalination might help extend our water supply? So I would direct that at Cynthia if you have any insight on that question.
Judy, that's a great question. So it was President Kennedy who said if science could figure out how to wrest fresh water from the seawater, at a reasonable cost, it would just be an enormous gift to humanity and solve so many problems all over the world. The problem with desalination technology now is that it's very, very energy intensive. So the more we rely on desalination, the more we are contributing to carbon emissions and the problem of climate change. And that's a really important part of the water issue that a lot of people miss, that water and energy are inextricably tied. It takes a lot of water to produce energy and a lot of energy to produce water. So the important thing is to use less of both in order to live sustainably. And with desal, the building of desal plants, at least in the United States, means we're using a lot more of both. Now, there is some solar desalination research going on in the Middle East, and boy, if they could make that work, again, in an affordable technology that really uses the sun's power to desalinate water, that story would change. But I think for the United States now, we can still use a lot less. So my thought is that from a sustainability perspective, the low-hanging fruit, again, is to work together to use less, to live differently, and to not build desalination plants all over the coast because of their energy intensity and because the technology is really changing quickly. So maybe that's a decision better left to the next generation when we see the technology getting better.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. All right, I see that we have someone raising their hand, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Let's see. Unfortunately, I think we have a question here from Jacqueline, but I think your line is also not connected to your phone, so I'm not able to unmute you. If you wanted to type your question into the Q&A box at the bottom, then we'll be able to address it that way. If anyone else has a question, now would be a perfect time to use that little hand-raising button that we talked about at the beginning. If you don't see it, you should be able to click on a button on your toolbar that has two little heads, and then there should be a hand-raising button there. I do see another question here coming in from Connie, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now, Connie. Hello?
Hi. My question is on the in the book. Do you address extractive industries such as coal mining? I live in West Virginia, where we're burying streams by the mile. Is that addressed at all in your materials?
It's a great question, Connie. I don't cover coal mining. There are many extractive industries, from coal mining where you are to phosphate mining where I am to, fracking is another issue now on the radar screen. And these, again, if this is a major issue for your region, this, again, is something that you could address in your faith community by having, I'm thinking of panels or tours of some of the damage if you want people to better understand the destruction that has been caused in your region. But no, I don't talk about coal mining in Blue Revolution.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions? Perfect. I see one here from Alice Andrews. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Alice, you should be on the line.
Yes, and thanks. This has been very interesting, and I do have the book.
Wonderful.
Question I have, I understand all of this and have read most of the book, and met Cynthia Barnett at a conference in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and it was a pleasure to meet her. I would love to be able to use it at our environmental stewardship meetings at Second Presbyterian Church. We have a group of 55 or so people who listen to our emails and our pleas to get involved, and we have a number of educational programs that we do every year. We're a nationally certified creation care congregation by PEC, or Presbyterians for Earth Care. And so I would love to be able to use this information in a class. And I don't know if I understood you correctly, I can order some of this online?
Yeah, you will be able to order or actually just download. You won't have to pay anything for it. The Eco-Justice resource, it's now online on our website. And we'll also put up shortly the one-page resource that Cynthia's been talking about, as well as recordings of the webinar and information on how you can purchase the book online for folks who don't already have that.
Well, that's just great. I didn't know if we needed special permission from Cynthia to teach some of the concepts in the book.
No, Alice. Hi, it's nice to talk to you. Thank you for being on the line today. No, you don't need any special permission. I'm absolutely thrilled that the National Council of Churches has done this, and I'm really excited to see the water ethic idea spreading around. And as I said in the presentation, it's not an idea originally to me. I really credit Luna Leopold with articulating a water ethic for the United States decades ago. And so I want to see it spread. And again, the National Council of Churches document is deep and connected to the Bible, and the one-pager we're talking about is lighter, tangible things that you can do in your congregation, such as the watershed tours and book groups and so on. So I'm thrilled to see it spread, and I thank the National Council of Churches for making these resources available online.
Oh, thank you very much. And I don't want to take more time than my share, but I did have two more quick questions. One is the photo or the picture, it looks like stained glass that you have displayed on the screen.
I was just thinking that. Where is that? It is fabulous.
I want that window.
Yeah,
Me too.
I just found it by Googling pictures of stained glass water, but I can
That is amazing.
see if I can look more into it and send out a link to that as well when I send out other resources. So
that is just incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
And the last question I had is that here in Arkansas, we are, I hate to say this, export this information very broadly, but we're having an awful time with our current legislature. They have presented some of the worst water bills and are passing them, and it's driving us crazy. But one of the things that I wondered if you have some information on or suggestions about is that Arkansas and a lot of other states have a classification under their Department of Environmental Quality called ERW, or Extraordinary Resource Waters. We have many streams defined as such in Arkansas, and then some segments of streams. We are trying to get some extra protection, higher levels of protection for those streams and their watersheds. Any ideas on how to do that? It's here we can enter something called third-party rulemaking to try to change the current regulations. Surface water is managed under Regulation 2 by Arkansas law, and we're wanting to amend that so that these reference streams can have a higher level of protection. Does anybody run into something like that?
So, Alice, I think you're asking a very important question, and I take you back to this idea of the democratization of water. These water decisions have been made by a relatively small group of people. It is highly bureaucratic. You know, all initials such as ERW and the bazillions of other initials, and people hear all of these initials and they just go blank and they have no idea what we're talking about. And I really think the answer to this is to back way up and educate people among the general public and in congregations, in colleges, wherever we can, and to show people what's happening to water. Why is the higher level of protection important? What did it look like 30 years ago? What does it look like now? What's changed over time? And again, I don't find that politicians are doing the right thing on their own. Nor our business, because of the financial structures. The idea is that we have to make this understandable to the general public, to the general congregant, so that they in turn put pressure on politicians to do the right thing. And that's why I guess I would hand the question back to you and say this is what we're talking about when we talk about, you know, bringing these issues to congregations and having your congregation sponsor, say your congregation sponsors a forum. And a lot of politicians won't go talk to environmental groups if they don't agree with them. They don't want to, they don't want to go to a group that hasn't supported them in the past, but they will come to a church. They will come to a place of worship. So I think you are in a good position with your church to be able to make some of this happen.
Well, I live hoping for that.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Alice. All right, next, I see we have Paige, so I'm going to unmute you, Paige.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you both. This has been a great presentation. Thanks to both of you. Just two quick questions that are more technical, I guess, than informational, but the resources that you're talking about, will we get those through email? Is that how you were planning on getting those to us?
Yeah,
actually, do we need to go to the website?
Yeah, the FACE guide resource is available right now on the website if you just go to the main page.
Right.
I will be sending out a email as well with a link to that, as well as once we've got the video of this assembled. So I'll make sure to send out an email to everyone who is on the webinar sign-up list.
Okay, cool. And then the other thing was I was supposed to get one of a copy of the book.
Yes.
And I hadn't received it yet.
Okay. Actually, unfortunately, we only just received them now in our office.
Okay.
Those are still in the process of getting mailed out. But I did want to mention for anyone who's on the call who did get an email from me requesting your address, if you haven't gotten back to me on that yet, that would be wonderful because we are hoping to send those books out to folks now that we do have them here.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paige.
All right. Next, we're going to go to Lela. I hope I'm not mangling your name too terribly. You should be on the line now.
Hey, yeah, thanks for taking this call. I was just wondering if Alice would tell us what church she goes to. It sounds like they're a very active church, and I'd like to see if there's anything on their website of ideas we could use at our church.
Yeah, just a second. I will unmute Alice again. All right, Alice, you should be on the line.
We are Second Presbyterian Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we do have a website. And it's secondpresbyterian.org, and somewhere under that title is Environmental Stewardship. And we are about to start a new Sunday school class April the 7th, and it will be one of the Northwest Earth Institute courses. In case you all don't know about those, they are just awesome. They're about living sustainably, about living in good health, and the usual leaving smaller carbon footprint. The one that we will be doing this time is living more simply, living sustainably. We did one of those classes earlier in the year, and it was so popular and so well attended. And it was one of those short-term classes. Everybody said, please, let's keep this going. Give us some more of this. So we're encouraged by that. And
wonderful.
I would be glad to share my email address, to visit with you a little bit more about what we're doing.
Thank you so much. Well, we'll definitely make sure to make a note of that for our resource email as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Next, I'm going to go to Jennifer, who's the next on our question list. Jennifer, you should be unmuted now.
Hi.
Hi there. Thanks for joining us.
I just wanted to ask if you could talk more about, what was my question? Talk more about stream straightening, tiling, and locks and dams, and the significance of that especially in the Midwest, where I'm from.
Stream straightening, tiling, and locks and dams. I'm not sure how to answer your question. It's such a big question, and I guess what I'll do is answer it in a very general way that might be able to apply to the listeners from all over the country rather than the specific issues in the Northwest. I mean, in general, what has happened in the United States over the past 100 years is that we have over-engineered pretty much every major river and every aquifer in the country. And again, we don't really see that because the pipes are running for, many, many times the nation's highway system underground. We can't see this. We can't see all the alterations that have taken place. We just see this sort of easy abundance of water coming out of the faucet, and some ponds, lakes, and springs and streams and rivers still look okay, so we sort of don't understand what's happening. And I think the big picture to look at in each of your communities is what is our watershed? Number one, what is the watershed of your congregation? You could just start there and then learn about what that watershed looked like 200 years ago. And what it looks like today, and what impact we've had on the watershed, what are the threats, and how we can live differently. And that last point, I think, is the most important, because we want to inspire people to live differently rather than depress them. And in all of these things, we can live differently. There have been hundreds and hundreds of dams removed in the past decade as we start understanding some of the negative impacts of dams. In many areas where we've always had chain link stormwater ponds, we're starting to do more natural wetlands filtration. So all of these things are changing in small ways all over the country. And in order to really drive this change, more people need to understand what's happening to their water. So I don't mean to deflect the question, Jennifer, but I guess I would say for your specific issues of a water ethic and what it looks like in your community, I think you want to answer all of those questions about your watershed for your congregation, help them understand what's really going on with fresh water in their community, and then help them arrive at solutions. That's the idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, before we move on to another question, I did want to note that we are planning to end here at 2:30, so we'll be able to take a few more questions. I'm changing the slide to our contact information, so you have both Cynthia's email address and my email address up on there. So feel free to write those down and contact us later if you have more questions or issues that you want to address that we weren't able to get to.
And I would also like to add, I would love to hear creative things congregations did, or success stories, or some impact you had in your local community. When I give talks, I try to use best practices from around the country, and I'd also like to keep compiling what faith communities are doing to bring a water ethic home to their communities. So if you have questions, email, but later, if good things happen, email me too. I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. I would echo that. That's something that we're always looking for as well, and would love to highlight those success stories on our website as well. So I'm going to turn for a second back to the typed question, because I think we've had a few of those accumulate here. We have one from, one from Victoria Freeman asking if there's any difference between the way that organic farmers and non-organic farmers are using water resources.
Ooh, that's a really good question. I've read some studies on this issue that indicate sometimes organic farmers are using as much or more than traditional farmers, and sometimes it was because they were smaller, and the margins are small in agriculture, so sometimes the larger operations can afford to do drip irrigation and some of the most the most high-tech stuff before the smaller operations. So I think that's a great question, but I don't think we see a big difference at this time between organic and traditional farming. But I think the important point to make is that all American agriculture really could use a lot less water. But the other thing you have to address with the organics, one of the greatest threats to water quality in the United States are all the pollutants that run off farms, and of course so much of it runs ultimately into the Mississippi River and then into the Gulf of Mexico, where it's helping create a dead zone. So if you in terms of water resources and how clean they are and how healthy they are, I think the more important point for organics is not how much they use, but the fact that they pollute less.
Wonderful. Thank you. I also wanted to get another one here from the written questions. We have one from Christina, who's asking about the drawdown of the Ogallala Aquifer. She says, I've been told that certain states have this under control, but that's not what I read. Is that something you can speak to at all?
Yeah, when I was using the word High Plains Aquifer, but it's the same aquifer, the Ogallala Aquifer. So on some parts of the aquifer, the drawdown is much more severe than in other parts. But I think all over this aquifer, I heard a very chilling term when I was in Texas in the fall. I was talking to farmers and water managers about their part of the Ogallala, and their term they use is planned depletion. They are managing depletion of the aquifer. And so this aquifer is in big trouble, and they were planning to deplete it in 50 years. And there is not a plan for what happens after 50 years. And to me, this is such an intergenerational issue and an intergenerational ethic. How could we be doing something that we know will jeopardize future people and future ecosystems? But that is what's happening in the Ogallala.
Wonderful. Thank you. We're going to go now to another question from Kathleen. So I'm going to unmute Kathleen here quickly.
Thank you. I'll keep this very brief. I just wanted to hearken back to resources for understanding your local rivers and watersheds. There may be a watershed association. Those people might not be in the pews of one of your churches, but they may be out there really studying the water flows. Sometimes there are river keepers. You can Google for that in your region. The river keeper movement is growing, and these are people who actually tend to the local river. And Trout Unlimited, the fisher people, if there's a chapter near you, they often can be a valuable source of understanding how the rivers are doing. And so there are some serendipitous allies out there for understanding your watershed and your streams.
I think that's such a good point, and I think that's a really good place to start. Organizations such as Riverkeeper are more than happy. They can even arrange a tour. You can get everybody out on a boat and see what's really happening in your watershed. And I would start there. I think that's more important than anything else you can do, is to first understand your place. Right now, when you talk to kids, they sort of define themselves by the streets or the school or the local Walmart or the store. They don't know where their creeks and rivers and watersheds are, and it's just a matter of reorienting ourselves around water. So that's a great idea.
And one quick footnote, sometimes when I'm in conferences now, they'd say, "Where are you from?" I mention the watershed that I live in.
That's great. And what is your watershed?
The Mill River watershed in New Haven County, Connecticut.
Yes, wonderful. That's I'm going to start doing that. Great idea.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
I like that a lot. Well, I think, unfortunately, we have so much interest in this topic, but it is coming up on 2:30 here. So I would, again, urge anyone who still has questions or ideas or success stories to contact both Cynthia or I and tell us about those questions or success stories. And I just want to take this time to thank everyone again for being on the webinar, for joining us, and for being so passionate and excited about these issues. It's really a source of hope to see so many people and congregations who are interested in cultivating this water ethic at a local level or at a congregational level. Cynthia, did you have any closing word that you wanted to say before we close down the webinar here?
I just wanted to thank everyone who joined us on the conference call, to thank Elspeth and the rest of the council for this great reader's guide, and do feel free to ask me any follow-up questions by email, and I hope you'll also share your successes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.